They were trained killers, covert agents, lone soldiers in enemy territory. And for a brief moment, they blazed across theater screens before vanishing without a trace. Throughout the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds, a strange pattern emerged in the world of action cinema. Films centered on mercenaries, rogue operatives, and off-the-books missions would get quietly released, then yanked from theaters almost immediately. Some lasted barely a week. Others were re-edited beyond recognition or shelved entirely in select countries. And for decades, audiences were left asking, what happened? These weren't just forgettable B-movies. Many had major stars, international locations, and themes that struck too close to home: military coups, energy manipulation, political assassinations, war crimes brushed under the rug. Some were released during delicate election years. Others featured violence that felt a little too realistic. A few disappeared so quickly that they became whispered legends among VHS collectors and film archivists. But why did these films vanish? Was it because of poor box office returns? Or was something more deliberate at play: pressure from governments, disapproval from studios, or internal sabotage? Today, we're digging into 15 obscure action films that disappeared from theaters almost overnight. They were real, they were seen, and then they were gone. Was it censorship, or something even darker? Fact Hajon. The Kill Reflex, 1989. Fred Williamson was no stranger to tough roles. Known for his swagger and unapologetic presence, he directed and starred in The Kill Reflex, a gritty detective-turned-assassin thriller released in 1989. But blink, and you missed it because the film vanished almost immediately after hitting theaters. Set against the backdrop of post-crack epidemic inner cities, The Kill Reflex follows a rogue cop who becomes entangled in a deadly conspiracy. It was blunt, violent, and unpolished in a way that didn't fit the sanitized Hollywood mold of the late 80 seconds. It played in only a handful of theaters before being pulled without explanation. For decades, the film remained unreleased on VHS or DVD in most regions, creating a mythology around its disappearance. Critics at the time offered mixed reactions, some calling it incoherent, others praising its raw authenticity. But it wasn't critical reception that sealed its fate. Rumors suggested a fallout between Williamson and the distribution company. Others pointed to the film's uncompromising depiction of corruption and urban warfare as a little too timely. Was The Kill Reflex simply an indie misfire, or was it buried because it hit too close to the truth? Fact #2. The Soldier, 1982. In 1982, The Soldier dropped into theaters like a classified file someone accidentally left open. Directed by James Glickenhaus and starring Ken Wall, the film told the story of a CIA operative who goes rogue to prevent a nuclear crisis orchestrated by a secret oil cabal. It was slick, fast-paced, and eerily prescient. The timing couldn't have been more charged. The early 80 seconds were rife with Cold War paranoia, energy crises, and whispered rumors of covert Western operations in the Middle East. The Soldier didn't shy away from any of it. In fact, it leaned into the geopolitical murk with a plot that framed the U.S. government itself as complicit in oil-driven blackmail. Despite a decent marketing push and wide release, the film was pulled from many theaters just weeks later. Television syndication was limited, and while it did see home video release, The Soldier has remained curiously absent from official retrospectives or Blu-ray reissues. Was it just another low-budget action flick lost in the shuffle? Or was The Soldier a little too bold in naming the real players behind global conflict? Fact #3. Dogs of War, 1980. Christopher Walken had just won an Oscar when he took on the role of mercenary Jamie Shannon in Dogs of War, a grim, slow-burning tale of post-colonial exploitation in Africa. Based on Frederick Forsyth's novel, the film was anything but typical action fare. It was an indictment. Released in 1980, Dogs of War quickly stirred controversy for its portrayal of corporate-sponsored coups and white foreign interference in African politics. While the theatrical cut focused more on character than combat, whispers spread about a longer, far more violent version that was shelved by the studio after early screenings. That version, reportedly closer to the novel's scathing tone, has never surfaced publicly. Walken's performance was unsettlingly cold, and the film's realism, complete with brutal child soldier imagery and graphic executions, made viewers uncomfortable. It wasn't censored outright, but it quietly faded. Studio interference, geopolitical sensitivities, and lackluster box office returns ensured it never reached cult status. But for a film that delves so deeply into Western-backed regime change, its disappearance feels less accidental and more strategic. Was Dogs of War simply ahead of its time, or was it buried for pointing fingers no one wanted pointed? Fact. Neljä. Hidden Assassin, tuhat yhdeksänsata yhdeksänkymmentäviisi. Dolph Lundgren was at the height of his post-Universal Soldier fame when Hidden Assassin, also known as The Shooter, quietly hit U.S. theaters in 1995. But the version American audiences saw wasn't the one originally filmed. Set in Prague, Hidden Assassin follows a U.S. Marshal investigating the killing of a Cuban ambassador, only to uncover a high-level conspiracy involving assassins, governments, and shifting Cold War allegiances. The European cut ran nearly 108 minutes. The American release? A heavily truncated 93-minute version stripped of crucial context and political nuance. Why the re-edit? According to those close to the production, the studio feared the original cut portrayed American intelligence services in an unflattering light. Dialogue was redubbed, subplots were removed, and when the film finally made its U.S. debut, it lasted barely a week in limited theaters before disappearing into video store obscurity. Today, Hidden Assassin is mostly remembered by die-hard action fans, many of whom still seek the elusive original version. Was it a simple case of market testing? Or did the film say something someone didn't want heard? Fact #5. The Last Hunter, 1980. Brutal, unrelenting, and banned in more countries than it was screened in The Last Hunter, is Italy's raw, visceral answer to Apocalypse Now. Directed by Antonio Margheriti under the pseudonym Anthony M. Dawson, the film tells the story of a U.S. soldier sent on a suicide mission deep behind enemy lines during the Vietnam War. But unlike its American counterparts, The Last Hunter doesn't romanticize warfare. It wallows in its filth. Torture, napalm, psychological breakdowns, it's all shown in excruciating detail. American distributors were initially eager, but once test audiences reacted with visible discomfort, and several Vietnam vets reportedly walked out midway through the film's U.S. release, was pulled. Rumors suggest the Department of Defense recommended the film not be widely screened, citing its demoralizing tone and irresponsible portrayal of military conduct. The result? It was never released in U.S. theaters, and for decades, it circulated only via murky bootlegs or under-the-table VHS copies. Was The Last Hunter too honest for America's post-war narrative? Or simply too raw to package as entertainment? Fact Shabakista. Siege Elif Watisarmia Wathalatha Wathamenun. Also known under its alternate title, Self-Defense. Siege is one of the most politically explosive action films you've probably never heard of. Shot in Halifax, Canada, and released in 1983, the film is set during a fictional police strike. A group of far-right vigilantes terrorizes a gay nightclub, leading to a brutal act of violence. What follows is a tightly wound standoff, as a witness is protected inside a residential apartment complex while the attackers lay siege to the building. At a glance, it's a gritty urban thriller, but beneath the surface, Siege was a daring critique of law enforcement complicity, systemic hate, and state-backed violence. The film's queerness wasn't subtext, it was explicit. And in the early 80 seconds, that was enough to make distributors nervous. Siege barely saw theatrical release in the U.S., relegated mostly to midnight screenings and festival circuits. Its home video presence was minimal. No mainstream studio ever re-released it, and for years, it was considered lost. Was Siege simply too bold for 1983, or did it expose a reality too uncomfortable to acknowledge? Fact #7. Best of the Best 3. No Turning Back 1995. The third entry in the Best of the Best franchise took a sharp detour from martial arts tournaments and into something far more dangerous: American extremism. Directed by and starring Philip Ree, Best of the Best 3 follows his character Tommy Lee as he returns to his hometown, only to confront a local militia group espousing white supremacist ideology. The film, made on a modest budget, doesn't just hint at domestic terrorism. It names it, shows it, and challenges it head-on. Released in 1995, mere months after the Oklahoma City bombing, the film's depiction of racist militias, gun culture, and small-town radicalization hit a nerve. Theatrical runs were limited. Several distributors backed away. And despite the franchise's previous popularity, this installment quietly disappeared from theaters, never gaining a wide release. Critics were split. Some praised the courage. Others called it reckless, saying it fanned flames in a dangerously unstable time. Its direct-to-video life was short-lived, and no major studio has ever reissued it in high definition. Did Best of the Best 3 fall victim to bad timing? Or did it speak too loudly about something America wasn't ready to confront? Fact #height. Eye of the Eagle, 1987. Shot in the Philippines and drenched in jungle warfare chaos, Eye of the Eagle was one of many low-budget Vietnam War exploitation films of the late 80 seconds. But this one didn't just push boundaries, it bulldozed them. Directed by Cirio H. Santiago, the film followed an elite unit gone rogue, turning their weapons on civilians and fellow soldiers. While ostensibly fictional, its narrative bore striking similarities to real-life war crimes, something military consultants reportedly warned the filmmakers about. Despite being produced for international release, the film faced an unusual form of quiet censorship. Several television stations blacklisted it. Distribution partners in the U.S. pulled out. And while it eventually trickled into select video stores, it never received an official MPAA rating or a proper theatrical run. The film's reputation grew underground, especially among bootleg circles. But its official presence was erased almost as quickly as it appeared. Was Eye of the Eagle just another grindhouse war flick? Or did it stumble too close to real reports buried in military archives? Fact. Shabaktasa. Caged Fury. Elif Watisarmia Watisarun. On paper, Caged Fury was just another women-in-prison exploitation movie. But the moment it premiered in 1990, something about it felt wrong. The film centers on a corrupt warden running a sadistic reform facility for female inmates. But beneath the leather-clad camp and schlocky surface was an undercurrent of abuse, coercion, and disturbing realism. Cast members would later reveal that some scenes weren't originally in the script and were added late in production, leading to disputes between actors, producers, and even local censors. In certain states, the film was banned outright. In others, theaters pulled it after just one screening due to complaints of its content crossing the line between fiction and provocation. Its original negatives were rumored lost in a studio fire, though some believe that was an excuse to bury it. Today, Caged Fury remains one of the most difficult 90 seconds exploitation films to track down in its uncut form. Was it pulled for being gratuitous, or for showing a truth too raw, too ugly, and too close to real headlines? 10. Extreme Justice, 1993. Imagine a movie that openly accused the LAPD of operating a secret death squad and then quietly vanished. That's Extreme Justice. Released in 1993, the film stars Lou Diamond Phillips and Scott Glenn as members of an elite police unit tasked with eliminating untouchable criminals. But as one officer begins questioning the legality and morality of their actions, the story shifts into a brutal takedown of police overreach and extrajudicial violence. The timing was radioactive. Just a year after the Rodney King riots, Extreme Justice felt less like fiction and more like accusation. It was originally scheduled for wide release, but negative test screenings and pushback from law enforcement groups forced its studio to downgrade the launch. Theatrical rollout was quietly scrapped in several cities. It was dumped onto cable TV late at night, often heavily edited. For a film with that much talent, it all felt too intentional. The movie didn't just challenge the system, it named it, and in doing so, may have crossed a line Hollywood wasn't ready to defend. Was Extreme Justice a pulpy cop thriller or a whistleblower too real to be seen? Fact is Night Avenging Force, 1986. Before the Taken series glamorized lone operatives with a very particular set of skills, there was Avenging Force, a film that dared to mix hyper-violence with political conspiracy and then promptly disappeared. Starring Michael Dudikoff, the film was intended as a gritty follow-up to Invasion USA, centered on a former secret agent drawn back into action to dismantle a domestic terrorist network. But this wasn't just patriotic mayhem. The villains were thinly veiled stand-ins for white nationalist militias and corrupt power elites. The film was released, but not fully. Several theaters cut runs short. Others never screened it at all. Rumors circulated about studio discomfort with the political undertones. Others cited marketing confusion. Was it an action blockbuster or a grim warning? Avenging Force was forgotten quickly, but those who saw it remember its disturbing realism and unapologetic brutality. Some even claim a darker, longer cut existed, one that was never officially released. Was Avenging Force a low-budget anomaly, or an early warning about threats still echoing today? Fact Hashin 2, Tenzan. The Ultimate Mission, 1988. If you've never heard of Tenzan, The Ultimate Mission, that may not be an accident. This Italian-North Korean co-production from 1988 vanished almost as soon as it was completed, and for good reason. The film features American actor Frank Zagarino as a special agent investigating illegal weapons development in North Korea. What makes it infamous isn't the plot, but where and how it was made. Shot partially in North Korea with approval from the regime, the production was shadowed by strange conditions, state interference, and eerie control over the final product. Though the film technically premiered in Europe, its U.S. release was sabotaged. Distributors feared backlash over its North Korean ties, and some even suggested the film served as a subtle piece of propaganda, portraying the regime in a surprisingly neutral, if not flattering light. Physical copies became rare. The film was never broadcast on Western television, and its few surviving prints exist in bootleg circles, often mislabeled or cut. Was Tenzan just a bad action movie? Or a geopolitical landmine buried beneath VHS tape? Fact Shabak Wahda Thalatha. Phantom Soldiers Elif wa Tis'armia wa Sabra wa Thamanun. Phantom Soldiers is the kind of film that shouldn't exist, and for a while, it almost didn't. Released in 1987, this Filipino-American production told the story of a covert U.S. military unit operating deep in Southeast Asia long after the Vietnam War was over. But these weren't standard-issue soldiers. They were described as phantoms, vanishing and reappearing, conducting illegal black ops missions for shadowy government figures. What made Phantom Soldiers notorious wasn't just its violence, it was its subtext. Veterans and intelligence insiders alleged that the film's events mirrored actual rumors of post-war CIA activity in Cambodia and Laos. In fact, several real-life ex-operatives claimed that scenes were uncomfortably accurate. U.S. distribution was halted mid-process. Some believe it was due to poor quality. Others suspect pressure from intelligence consultants, many of whom allegedly warned the production to stop shooting. Bootlegs circulated among military buffs, but official records of the film's U.S. screening schedule are mysteriously thin. Was Phantom Soldiers just B-movie fantasy? Or did it stumble across something that was never meant to be dramatized? Fact Shibak Wahda Arba. Bulletproof Elv wa Tis'armia wa Thamania wa Thamanun. Gary Busey plays a hardened commando infiltrating a terrorist organization in Bulletproof, a 1988 film that promised high-octane mayhem and delivered something far stranger. The plot is standard fare. An elite agent goes deep undercover to recover a stolen tank. But what set Bulletproof apart wasn't its story, it was its production. Rumors swirled that real weapons were used on set. Several crew members allegedly walked off mid-shoot over safety concerns. One stunt coordinator later claimed that military-grade explosives were detonated without permits. Theaters booked it. Then, without explanation, several canceled screenings. The film limped through a bare minimum release and then vanished, never receiving a major home video push. In later interviews, Busey deflected questions about the production, calling it, "not the movie you think it is." Could Bulletproof have been scrapped for safety concerns, or did the project get too close to military contractors no one wanted exposed? 5. Red Scorpion. Red Scorpion. Red Scorpion. Red Scorpion. On the surface, Red Scorpion looks like Cold War propaganda with muscles. Dolph Lundgren stars as a Soviet agent sent to Africa to suppress rebel forces only to switch sides and fight for freedom. But dig deeper, and the film's true controversy emerges. It was partially financed by supporters of South Africa's apartheid regime. Filmed in Namibia and produced with help from a right-wing think tank, Red Scorpion quickly drew condemnation. Protesters picketed outside early screenings. Civil rights groups accused the filmmakers of laundering pro-apartheid funding through Hollywood spectacle. The film's box office returns were undercut by media scrutiny and growing public outrage. Distributors quietly dropped it. Plans for a wide re-release were shelved. And while it did eventually surface on home video, Red Scorpion became a cautionary tale about political money and entertainment. Was it an unintentional propaganda piece, or proof that even action movies can serve someone else's agenda? Bonus fact: The Forgotten Unreleased. 1992. There's a film called The Forgotten, except, officially, it doesn't exist. Shot in 1992 under a pseudonymous production title, The Forgotten was allegedly financed through a shell company with ties to military contractors. The plot? A former mercenary haunted by his missions in Central America, now targeted by the very agency that once employed him. What little is known comes from leaked production notes and one surviving work print that surfaced briefly on underground forums in the early 2000s. The film reportedly contained scenes of CIA torture techniques, references to real operations like Project Phoenix, and even reenactments of missions linked to Latin American death squads. No distributor ever stepped forward. The crew was bound by NDAs. And the film's negative? Lost or perhaps destroyed. Was The Forgotten pulled because of legal disputes? Or because it blurred the line between fiction and classified truth? These weren't just action films, they were ghosts. Briefly visible, immediately buried, and rarely spoken of again. Whether pulled for political pressure, legal chaos, or simple fear, each title left behind more questions than answers. Which of these films do you think was erased on purpose? Have you ever seen one that vanished before you could watch it again? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more hidden history from cinema's shadow files, don't forget to subscribe.